Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Media Watch, where we talk about the media, basically. News stories all the time. We try to point out some of the, I would guess, at least some of the the wrong things that are not wrong or not right or like odd or stupid, maybe something like that. Anyway, but it's, and as always, information to do that, actually. the stories, a lot of it like that. They're very, very, very pointed. Especially when you come to CNN and the fight between CNN and Fox News, what's happening, which is Fox News, of course, is winning. At any rate, we're going to talk tonight about a lot of different things, and I think I'm going to start off with, well, first of all, it was Rob Raffelli, who is my co-host on the show here, and he has a lot of slides and stuff that's going to kind of go back to what I wanted to do, But again, I want to start off the show by talking about this Israel at war business and so on. And there's so many things I can really talk about and so on. But it's got to be like you always talk about the news is the latest news, the top topic for that day, and of course it changes the next day. It's not changing so much these days over the last almost month now. When the Hamas invaded essentially and brutally murdered 1,400 people, it just was so bad. But now, of course, the Israelis are turning around the very next day. In fact, maybe that same day they went after all the places that they started bombing in Gaza, mm-hmm. In Gaza, and that, they're just destroying the country. Very precision. Keep in mind now, this is not carpet bombing like in World War II, or any place else for that matter. Now they can pick a building out and destroy that building. Unfortunately, some of that stuff flies in the wrong. When you destroy one building, if the other building is right next door, that suffers damage too, and of course a lot of people get killed in that. And I really do believe, in fact, that Hamas is using even their family members, let alone other civilians, for they just figure that the Israelis won't do it. Well, that day is over. As I said before the show with Rob here, the Jews have been suffering ever since they tacked that guy up on a cross. They've been, and I don't know what that was all about, because it was the Romans that did it. Probably the Jewish priests or whatever it was were complicit in whatever it was had to happen and so on. But since that time, and they've just taken it. They just roll off a bunch of Jews and they get killed, and they never fought back. At one time they did, in 1943, the Jewish ghetto revolted and against the Nazis, and they didn't really get very far. I think it only lasted a few days, really, and they killed 60,000 Jews, but of course they were all going to be killed anyway, But that was a revolt, and there was a line in the movie called The Pianist, where the woman is who's hiding the pianist in someplace. And she comes up with this revolution, this insurrection has just taken place by the Jews. And her comment was, who would have thought the Jews would do that? Well, they did. Today, it's a whole different ballgame. They were unarmed in Poland in 1943. But now the Jews, the Israelis, Israel, the country Israel, has the latest technology. And in fact, what the Hamas did, and Netanyahu right off the bat said, we're at war, and we are at war. I love this sort of rules of war. There's no rules of war. War is what you can get away with, and that's what the Israelis are doing right now. There's no whole, this whole business the last few days, where they bombed the camp, and they killed a lot of people. You saw all the pictures of people carrying children off. And they're terrible. Didn't bother the Jews. Didn't bother Israel. Netanyahu. They went back the next day, bombed the same camp over again, and they got some more of those. And they know where those guys are. I don't know what they think, that they think they're hiding someplace. The Mossad, the intelligence agency for the Israeli, those are really, really bad guys. You don't want to mess with those guys, because they actually have, no other intelligence agency in the world has a certain area, a certain part of their organization is assassination. Those are the guys that assassinate people. And like the head of the lives in Qatar. Well, I wouldn't. He better have a lot of bodyguards, because they're going to get him. At some point, they're going to get him. And quite honestly, I could care less.
Yeah.
I guess I've gone far enough and so on. What do you want to talk about, Rob?
You've gone far enough.
Okay.
All right. First of all, I'm going to trash everything you said.
All right. Go ahead.
Just teasing a little.
Mossad. Remember, the Mossad's with me.
All
right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I just wanted to add a little bit, because I have read extensively on these topics myself.
Mm-hmm.
So in the ghetto uprising of 1943, there was, they weren't well armed, but they were not unarmed. They had been smuggling. There had actually been an active smuggling operation for weapons and things to make makeshift weapons for quite a while.
Right.
They of course they were crushed, but the Nazis got a really, really harsh lesson from that. And I don't know how much you've read from survivors of the concentration camps.
Well, I knew one, as I said last time I was in.
Yeah,
I knew Tom Blatt.
Well, I've known a few myself, including some with the tattoos. Anyway, one of the things that they said consistently, including guys like Elie Wiesenthal, they said, the best of us did not survive.
Yeah.
They meant, hey, one of the reasons I'm here is that I switched places with somebody who probably would not have been executed then, but I bumped somebody else out of line, or I stole some food from somebody who would have probably survived, but he said, and I would have starved. And they just plain flat out said, that's the way the system was. The best of us did not survive because nobody following the rules would have.
Yeah.
So anyway,
and he won the Nobel Prize too, by the way.
And he probably deserved it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I don't remember what all
for what he did after he got out. Of course, it was a matter of survival, as you say.
I don't know what all Viktor Frankl had to say about it, but I read his what is it? Man's Search for Meaning.
I'm not sure who was that.
Viktor Frankl was a concentration camp survivor. And he was a psychiatrist before he went in. And in fact, one of the things that he observed, and he thought, I have to survive to write this up, not only to bear witness to the atrocities, but because of what he learned was that he saw people who were physically in better shape, but mentally broken, die, where people who were frankly sicker and weaker, but had a reason to live, survive.
Yeah.
And he found this fascinating. He was actually, because they were kept from having paper, he would find scraps to write notes and hide them. But he literally, he published his book, which he was actually writing Man's Search for Meaning while in the concentration camp.
Yeah, there was a guy that did a cartoon thing too.
Mouse.
Yeah.
I can't think of it. Art Spiegelman.
Yeah.
And he wrote it about his father, because his father was the one who was in the concentration camp.
Right, yeah.
And I'd recommend Mouse to anyone, and he had a very hard time teasing the information out of his father. And since they wound up in New York City in the suburbs, there's actually a sequel, Mouse 2, from Mauschwitz to the Catskills.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
go ahead.
So then you were talking about, here's Hamas launching all these attacks. First, obviously, they planned these attacks for years. They were stocking this stuff for years. The day that war started was the day that Hamas decided it would start. The people who were, their tactics were the tactics they had decided to have. There's no mistake, no heat of the moment. This is what they were going to do, and they did it. And the other part of that is that almost everything about, you were talking about rules in war, but almost everything about what they do is a war crime. For one thing, they don't want to be bombed, they'd like to win.
Right.
So they put headquarters and communications and supply dumps under hospitals,
Right.
under schools.
Right.
You may remember from Gulf War I that Saddam Hussein was parking fighter jets in elementary school athletic fields.
I remember that, yeah.
So anyway, putting your war material and resources in the midst of civilians to use them as human
Right.
shields is a war crime.
Right.
Uh,
That's what they say. It gets me a couple things there. You finished? Okay.
I can start again at any
All
time.
right. Well,
but yes,
let me get some about civilians.
Sure.
Civilians were not really a part of the warfare up until really World War II. There was sometimes in the World War I where they bombed the village or shelled the village and so on. But it's only when World War II started that they started bombing for civilians. Curtis LeMay basically said, well, first of all, Bomber Harris, the head of the bombing operation for the Royal Air Force, so they called him Bomber Harris, and he got a lot of crap about what he did. In fact, he authorized Dresden, which was essentially we have a lot of bombs left over, let's go drop them on Dresden and kill all the civilians. And they did, and he was never forgiven. It was not until 20 or 30 years later that he was actually recognized, Bomber Harris, for what he did. But he did it. Same with Curtis LeMay. But he did firebombing,
Firebombing of Tokyo.
Yeah, not targeting. They just, they build their houses with water. Let's just burn them all out. And he killed, any given raid that he did with all the B-39s, he killed more people that were killed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And in fact, as he said himself, Curtis LeMay, he ran for vice president, I guess it was, in some party that was in locally on the ballot.
Yeah,
and so
I sort of remember.
And what's the guy named General Peoples, what's her name, Jane Russell's husband, who was he was one rank below Curtis LeMay. Anyway, Curtis LeMay said, if the Japanese had won the war, he would have been tried as a war crime. He would have been tried as a war crime.
Yes. Since you mentioned that, I'm just going to mention as a personal note that I've been to Tokyo several times.
Yeah.
And one of the characters of the city, parts of it that weren't bombed out and burned out.
Yeah.
They are very much as they were, except maybe with updated buildings.
Yeah.
But the parts that were destroyed, that's where you'll find broad avenues and great everything completely renewed there.
Yeah.
I'm not making a virtue of it.
That's
I'm just
the way
saying
you get
urban renewal.
Yeah, not what they call it, revitalize a community.
Yeah, it's pretty horrible. Nonetheless, those are the parts of the city that look much newer.
Yeah.
In fact, this one day I was talking with a Japanese colleague, and he mentioned one of the places where you find a lot of restaurants, nightclubs, and such like. He said Shinjuku, and he says, you'll like Shinjuku. That's a new part of the city, as the name implies.
Yeah.
And I thought, as the name implies, and I looked at the characters because they have a lot of homonyms. But as it turned out, the Shin in Shinjuku means new.
New. New community, right.
Right.
A lot of places, like Dresden was rebuilt, and all kinds of places like that, Berlin. But the bottom line is that's when civilians suffered. So now all of a sudden, there's this civilian business, and since then, there's been, Vietnam, all kinds of wars that we've been in, and in fact in the Middle East especially, they're using civilians as shields, as simple as that, hoping that this moralistic idea will come, and we can't really bomb because there was the civilians there. And, and of course with the pictures and the internet these days and so on, you'll get to see people carrying babies, carrying children out of debris or buried in rubble and so on. And this is terrible, quite honestly, obviously. But that's the way it is these days.
Well, look, Hamas not only went up to a bunch of places where they would not face much opposition and murdered people, but they also carried people off to be hostages, people who they have them they have tunnels full of supplies and fighters, and they have adults and children in among them because they want to make sure that they're not taken out indiscriminately. After all, the Israelis know where lots of these tunnels are. It would not be that hard to pipe a bunch of something flammable and torch the whole thing up, except they're saying, well, that's where our hostages are.
Yeah.
By the way,
they're in those caves too, those tunnels and stuff too, yeah.
So something about just for Israelis and the possibility of hijackers on airplanes, they figured this out a long time ago. They always have sky marshals on their planes, and they have a doctrine. And the doctrine is, if the hijacker is holding a civilian in front of them, you shoot the guy through the human shield.
Yeah.
They say, look, you want to lose one person or a plane full?
Yeah, right. or you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or you and the rest of the plane full.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, right.
So no,
and airlines used to be hijacked quite a bit. You don't hear about it anymore.
No, they got pretty rough with that.
Yeah.
Well, you may remember that there was a point where there were some, I think it might have been Syrians were pissed with Russia, and they tortured some people, they killed some people, and the next thing you know, the Russians had pulled a Mossad on these other guys. They found out who the culprits were, and they hunted them down relentlessly and destroyed them.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, they started leaving Russians alone.
These are bad guys. This is Mossad. You don't want to mess with those guys. You walk around, all of a sudden, the guy in Qatar that heads Hamas is in Qatar, living the good life, right? But I bet he's got a lot of bodyguards and a lot of protection around him and so on, because that's a guy and the Mossad will probably eventually get him. That's the way it works. It's a part of their apparatus, their way they do things. They're not afraid. A lot of these assemblies, they don't really believe in assassination of higher ups and so on. It used to be a rule you didn't do that. Then they shot down Yamamoto over the Philippine Sea somewhere and so on. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, since we were talking about what's been going on with that, the West now has loads and loads and loads of Muslims who are sympathizing with Hamas.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have Muslims who are not sympathizing with Hamas. There's decent people and people who disagree all over the place. Mm-hmm. But this, if you look at this picture, these people are praying for Hamas and supporting Hamas. And where are they? These are in London. They are outside number 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister's residence.
Yeah.
I've been here, but there wasn't anybody in the street praying.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, that's been all over. That's the thing about it, anti-Semitism. I just don't get it. I don't get what the Jews did. I mean, like I say, they tacked that guy up on the cross. Is that the only thing you can come up with? They tried to blame him, of course, the plague in the 1300s and so on. They tried to blame that on the Jews. So they go into villages and they kill everybody in Russia, all over Europe.
But you can see all that stuff it's the opposite of evidence-based. Mm-hmm. You say, "Ooh, here's a crisis. Never let a good crisis go to waste."
Yeah.
I've always wanted to kill community such and such. Let's blame it on them. I mean, after all, how do you know it wasn't them? We better kill them all and see if it was.
Yeah.
If it stops, then at least we killed the right guys. If it didn't, well, we never liked them anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So this next picture here that I wanted to throw in was, this is what I knew was coming. Here's AOC.
The squad.
And the squad, they are telling you every American must be prepared, must be ready to welcome Palestinians into their community. Yeah. And I'm giving that a big no. Yeah. And in fact, this is what I got out of. Here's the King of Jordan says no refugees will be allowed in, no Palestinian refugees will be allowed in Egypt or Jordan. And I say, who knows Palestinians better than Egypt and Jordan? If their Muslim neighbors don't want them, I sure don't.
Well, the King of Jordan, and they kind of behind this whole thing, what Hamas did, just since October 7th and so on, and then now they're complaining about the fact that all this bombing is going on and so on. Well, you could easily solve that. Ship them out to your country. Now they won't be bombed on, and they won't be under the thumb of Hamas.
And I'll go back again to just the concept that if October 7th hadn't happened, if the Hamas had not launched that, how many bombs would be dropped in Gaza? I would go with zero.
Right.
Because if this wasn't happening, it's. I mean, this brings up the subject of ceasefire. Wait a second. You come over here and hurt me badly, and run back to your little hidey hole, and I come to do something about it, and now we're screaming ceasefire. You could have had a ceasefire. You had a ceasefire before you launched your attack.
Yeah.
We had a ceasefire. It was like 12 years long. So you're going to come over here and kill 1,400 of my civilians and then scream ceasefire?
Yeah.
We're not ready.
Yeah.
And remember what the important thing about war is, war isn't over when you say it's over.
Yeah.
The enemy has a vote too.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So war is over when they say it's over.
Well, that's the crazy thing about that. You know, they talk about they killed 1,400 Jewish Israelis. They weren't all Jewish,
right.
Probably even. A lot of them were Americans. They were just the Burning Man. They reminds me of somewhere out in the desert someplace doing the Burning Man.
Right. It was a nature and peace and environment related music festival. Next thing you know, we've got all these Palestinians in paragliders. In fact, I think the last show I used a picture of that where there are the paragliders descending down, and here are the people on the ground running away. And I labeled it because it was absolutely accurate. Yeah. In 3 minutes, these guys were killing these guys.
Right, yeah.
So just so you understand what that was about.
Well, that was proportionate. I love that. I love that term. I think it was the guy that this is not proportionate. 1,400 people were killed in Israel, and now they've killed, well, probably 10,000 Israelis and so on. Proportionate. Well, I got a little number for you that's proportionate, 6 million. And now they're going to say, well, that's not the same. This is the Middle East. We're not Nazis. Keep in mind that the Nazis and the Middle East were in cahoots the whole World War. The only that united both of them, and they were united. They were the people that I don't think they were really. They raised divisions. They had the same ideal: kill the Jews. The Nazis did it, and the Israelis, this whatever the head of this, whatever they call him, the Hussein of Jerusalem. I can't remember what
the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem was in fact he was. Who was the big leader of the PLO? Yasser Arafat.
Yeah.
He was Arafat's dad. He was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And he had a diplomatic mission. I mean, we have photographs of him with Hitler.
Yeah.
They were happy with each other because they both wanted to kill Jews.
Kill Jews. That was what united them. That's what made them common. Kill the Jews. So when you say, well, it's not proportionate and so on, well, the 6 million Jews got killed, and I think that to some degree, the Middle Eastern people, even at that time, the Palestinians or whatever you want to call them, and that's a whole different, there are all kinds of tribes out there. Keep in mind that these countries didn't exist up until the First World War. It was part of the Ottoman Empire, which lost the war, so the Allies came, the people that came in, especially France and England, they're the ones that set the boundaries for all of these countries. Syria, Iraq, not so much Afghanistan, but Iran, and of course Lebanon, and
Jordan,
and then of course what was not Israel in that time, but it basically set up these they established the mandates for these areas and became countries and so on.
And so the area that we think of as present day Jordan and Israel, that was because it straddled the Jordan River. It was referred to that British mandate was Transjordan. And they had a movement and a very well funded movement in Britain for quite a while. There were all these Jews who wanted to reestablish Israel, and of course Jews had been living continuously in that territory for thousands of years. And in fact, here's the other cute thing about that international Jews, people in Europe and elsewhere, had been buying land, not stealing, but they had been buying land from Turkish landlords because the Ottoman Turk Empire owned it. So they'd been buying land from absentee landlords. So that they actually literally had paid for and owned lots of that land, and they've been moving to it over the course of decades, maybe a couple of centuries. This is people coming back from the diaspora. And of course, like I said, the Jews had lived there and in other Middle Eastern countries for quite a while. So they said, okay, Britain has the Transjordan mandate, and they said, well, of course, we're going to do something for the Jews, and of course we're going to do something for the non-Jews.
Right.
They said, okay, so the so-called Palestinian part, that's Jordan,
Yeah.
and the other part is going to be Israel.
Yeah.
They were dividing it,
and
and
the British
there's
were in charge of that man. They got named Balfour.
yes,
He wrote it down.
Balfour Declaration.
Declaration, right? That happened after the First World War.
Yes, and so here's the.
They're going to hold them to it.
They're getting ready. Yeah, they're getting ready to do it, and the Israelis got impatient, and they said, "Look, okay, we're declaring that it's a done deal. We're declaring Israel a separate state," and boom, five at least neighboring countries invaded them.
Yeah, right.
And which is
the
why
same day they were declared to be a country.
Yeah.
They had already been fighting already anyway, but now they really wanted to get the Jews.
And of course, at that time, the way the mandate was going to go was that Israel was going to be from the sea to Jordan,
Right.
and then everything across Jordan, the rest of the mandate was going to be Jordan, and it was going to be Muslim.
Yeah.
So then now we hear about the West Bank, because by the time of the ceasefire in '48,
Yeah.
they had taken a big part of that area that we now call the West Bank, and Egypt had managed to seize a part that the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, right.
And that's
right.
the way that stayed.
That's how that exists, right?
And the Israelis had sued for peace, and they said, "Look, let's even things up, and we'll repatriate whoever you want to." And they said, "Oh no, we're not talking to these guys." So
Yeah.
So they don't negotiate. You don't get a settlement.
Yeah, because you're not a country. That's it. We'll recognize you as a country.
That's right. They're the hated Jewish entity.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I think we've been half an hour already to this whole thing and that, but and we could talk a lot more about it. I got a lot of notes here I can talk about, especially about the anti-Semitism that's going on all over the world, right here in Santa Barbara. In fact, they had the same things out at the university, and it was actually for the Jews, and there was also one for the Palestinians. And there's some professor, was it 110 or not, like something like that, professors sided with signed something kind of a note siding with the Palestinians, and not ignoring what happened on September 7th. Anyway.
Yeah, we've got a few seconds of this.
Yeah.
How about, since we're talking about the local stuff, here we are out in Isla Vista, and a bunch of people who support Israel
that's right.
put up these are the posters of kidnapped children.
Yeah.
And
this is in Isla Vista, isn't it?
This is in Isla Vista. So these are the other people who come along, and they're tearing down those pictures of people who put up in support of the kidnapped children.
Yeah.
So you can see these are your basic pencil necks who feel very righteous, screwing with other people's stuff.
Yeah. This guy was filming the whole thing.
I would have been more impressed if they were, let's say, putting up their own.
Yeah, and it was on the internet.
Yeah.
In fact, I recognize right at the corner there at where Starbucks is, basically, in that place, that four corner. The only stoplight in Isla Vista.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. Let's go on to something else, I guess.
Thought
Talk about something else.
Something else? Well, I could.
Or you got something else?
Well, I think.
Yeah, show us some of these slides.
I was just amused.
Even if they do the same topic. Sort of funny.
I was amused. This is somebody who's basically, see, we've been seeing queers for Palestine.
Yeah.
We're seeing LGBTQ for
Yeah,
Palestine.
show that slide too.
Well,
but let's talk about this one first.
This one, so a lot of us are scratching our heads and saying, you realize that if you were openly queer in Palestine, they would throw you off a roof and kill you.
Yeah.
That then, and not because they hate you especially, but the Quran justifies it.
Exactly.
Even as I heard this one from we had a problem with the Barbary pirates.
Yeah.
This was like in the 1790s or so.
Yeah, we had just become a country.
Right, like Jefferson is saying.
Just to interrupt you one time, the shores of Montezuma to the
From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli.
Tripoli.
And
That's the marine thing.
You're right, and this is where Jefferson is saying we have no problem with Muslims. We have no problem with with Tripoli or any. Why are you taking our people as slaves? Why are you attacking our ships and taking our people? And they said, because the Quran allows us to.
Yeah, right.
And he says, oh, well, in that case, we're allowed to come over there and beat the crap out of you.
Yeah.
And that's when we sent Marines to Tripoli. This wasn't a, oh, I don't know, let's go find some people and punch them.
Yeah.
There was, they were literally boarding American ships in the Mediterranean and,
Yeah, right.
and carrying people off as slaves.
Yeah.
And something the people should know about is
that's
that.
right. Yeah, I got that right now. Yeah, America. That's why they actually sought them out.
Yeah.
And now they wanted to bribe it. You know, they were England, France, all that stuff. They'd always give them the bribe to get the park there or get shot. The United States parked their frigate pretty close in, and they got pointed the guns out. And now all of a sudden, the Mufti or whatever the heck it was,
whoever it was,
all of a sudden, oh yeah, you're okay. No more American slaves.
Over a fairly short time,
yeah,
it was like maybe 50 to 80 years. In the Mediterranean, North Africans took more white Europeans as slaves than blacks were ever taken in the transatlantic slave trade.
Right.
I mean, it was stupendous, and they felt fine about it. They would look you right in the eye and they said, the Quran allows it.
Yeah, right.
And they said, oh, well, the Quran allows it.
Yeah, right. Right. It doesn't allow it in their our system and all that. Yeah, you know, nothing's wrong with the Muslim religion. There's
much to be admired.
Yeah, it's different, but it's been just as Christianity was used for a lot of killings and things like that. When even in the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, you know, obviously even in Jesus' time and all that. I guess we've evolved or something like that to some degree and all that. But religion can be very dangerous. Put it that way. When you get too exposed to it, you get too much with it. It allows you all of a sudden to do a lot of things that really you shouldn't be. You can't be doing. And in fact, even as we speak now, civilians being killed now in Hamas. Because the Hamas believes that this is what it should be. We got to get rid of these Jews.
There's some interesting stuff in the.
They're not doing very well at it. Go ahead.
In early Islam, and I mean when the Prophet was still alive.
Yeah.
He wanted. You know, there were a lot of Jews in the Arabian Peninsula,
right.
Because after all, there was no Islam. There were a variety of faiths, including Christians and Jews. And when he was founding his religion and founding his communities, they wanted Jewish participation. They said, you know, you should convert.
Yeah.
And when we pray 5 times a day, we'll pray in the direction of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And the Jews weren't having it, so he decided, oh, you won't play ball, huh? So after that, it turns out, now, what do you know? Now Jew hatred is in the Quran, whereas before it was not.
Yeah.
So at any rate, now it's one of those articles of faith, and I think it was because the Prophet's nose was out of joint about it.
Yeah.
But
show that other slide with the woman that's showing about gays are for Palestine.
Oh, that was this. This is the.
Yeah, there it is.
And so here's somebody who's saying, "Oh yeah, I tell you what, you LGBTQ plus influencer, we'll give you a free trip to Gaza.
Yeah, right.
Sign up. Yeah, we'll give you a free trip.
Yeah.
You'll love it.
You'll love it. Right?
Yeah.
Living in those tunnels with that.
You guys can look. Gays for Palestine can march just about any place except Palestine.
Yeah.
That's where they would be killed.
Yeah, this tells you, I've said this many times, protests are a joke. I mean, they just don't work. It draws people out like this, you know, that kind of thing. It has nothing to do with anything. And they're dangerous. And by the way, guys, I have to tell you, get the camera on me, please. There you go.
You're going to break that camera.
Yeah, there you go. I guess red lights means that it's on me. Anyway.
It does.
Guys go to protests to meet women. That's what they do. I've been to a couple of them myself, in fact, here locally and so on, and guys freely admit it. because that's easy pickings. Put it that way. Let it go at that.
Well, isn't that why they buy dogs?
Well, if the girls decide that these guys are up with them and they're protesting with them and so on, things happen. Put it that way.
Yeah, look,
and that's what I've talked to guys that's exactly why they go.
Spirits are high.
Especially students from UCSB.
Spirits are high. You meet folks. You're excited. You're interested in the same stuff.
Yeah.
They're young and good looking. Who knows what might happen?
Okay, well, we only got a few minutes left here, 20 minutes or so. I don't know if you want to keep talking about this, but
I don't know.
Any other totally loose stuff? Well, we got a new guy that's the Speaker of the House, and he's...
okay, why don't you run with that?
I don't know. I'm just...
Okay, you can't run with that, and neither can I. And here's why. Because I don't know very much about the guy.
Nobody did.
I was actually, when they put him up as a possible, I was as surprised as anyone. I was surprised that enough Republicans defected that Jim Jordan did not get the speakership.
Yeah,
I thought that Jim Jordan would have been spectacularly good.
Yeah.
And I have to look into this more, but I'm really not too thrilled with the Republicans who voted against him. Yeah.
Well, that happened, of course, and he's still around. He's going to be chairman of the committees and so on.
Yeah.
And they'll go to do it. That's nothing about the Nancy Pelosi. And I don't know what the guy Jeffries or something is now.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Yeah, of the thing and so on. You can bet your sweet Pelosi is still. In fact, she's running again in 2020 and 2024. She's going to keep her seat, and I'll bet you Jeffries doesn't do much with as the intent would be the speaker. He's the minority leader of in the House of Representatives. I bet he goes to Nancy and asks her, "Is this the right thing to do? Should we do it this way?" Nancy's not out of the picture. Put it that way. She's still up there, and that they go to her because she really, talk about having when she had the majority and so on. Nobody voted against her. Every Democrat, and they still do for that matter, they all vote as one. Not one Democrat votes the way against Nancy Pelosi's and the programs and so on. And she had a very slim minority too. They keep saying that the Republicans have a very slim majority. So did Nancy, but he had enough because she told people that if you vote against me, we're changing our parking place to West Virginia. Actually, it's actually in Ohio, right across the river, and so on. So you can park your car over there. And your office. We're giving you another place there. Pretty nice place. It's a trailer. It's a view of the Atlantic Ocean in the Delaware, and you can take the bus to get into Washington D.C. in the morning if you want to. Anyway, I got off on that subject, but like I say, nobody really knew who the guy is. But just so far, he's got stuff passed basically.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, since you were the only person who's seen the break with Nancy ever that I saw was Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Yeah. And he may be changing parties, I'm not sure.
Yeah, right, that's true. It could be.
Of course, he's old enough that he might...
Maybe he better change party because he may get voted out in West Virginia. Now West Virginia is a Republican state, except for him.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
No one's as bread as butter, that's for sure. Of course, he was the one that voted for that $1.7 trillion infrastructure bill and so on. That, oh my God, it had nothing to do with infrastructure.
No, that was shoveling money at all of the Democrats' friends.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I'd like to toss out a little bit about it's Secretary of let's see, it's
Homeland Security.
Yeah. Department of Homeland Security, and that's Mayorkas.
Yeah, Mayorkas, right.
I think I've got a couple of...
I kind of feel sorry for that guy. I mean, he's a prop for the Obama administration, but boy, he's getting a lot of crap. They want to impeach him. They want to get rid of him.
Well, I mean, you got to look at him and see...
The Republicans do.
Yeah, let's see. Here he is. I got a couple of Mayorkas.
Okay.
Let's see what all I... Because
This is the guy that's in charge of the border.
By encountering, processing, dispersing, or that have come in as a known or unknown gotaway. What approximately? I don't need an exact number. So what do we got?
Senator, let me say.
I need numbers. Again, don't filibuster me. How many people has this administration led into the country?
Let me say at the outset that our job would be a lot easier if the broken immigration system was fixed.
Mr. Secretary, I want a number. How many people have you led into this country?
I should also.
Okay, I'll give you the number. It's about 6 million.
All right, so I thought that, whatever it is that Mayorkas would like to say,
Yeah.
that's fine. But the idea that you're in front of a congressional committee and he says, well, how many is that? And you won't say.
Yeah.
You will say anything except that.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of, I've got something else about him, but
He perfectly knows the number just as but he's just he's a speaker. He's just a figurehead.
He's a mouthpiece
for the administration. If he wants his job, he says he's got to do what do you call it? The filibuster, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
Say a lot of crap that doesn't mean nothing.
Okay. This other one is also Mayorkas,
Okay.
and here, the concept here is we have a bunch of foreign students who, in fact, they're not Americans at all, and who are out there in the street, screaming for the death of Jews. And so he's being asked, well, maybe those people should be deported.
Should students who are here on a visa, who gather and chant that slogan and actively advocate for the elimination of Israel and attacks on Jewish individuals, whether in the Middle East or here in the United States, as we're seeing on college campuses, should those students have their visas revoked?
Senator, I believe you are referencing a provision in the Immigration and Nationality Act about which you have written to me, and I am very familiar with your assertion that statutory provision requires the revocation of their visa.
But should they have their visas revoked? I'm asking you.
We are assessing your legal assertion. It is a matter of legal interpretation of the statute.
Well, just as a moral matter, I mean, should students who are here, foreigners who are here in this country, accessing our university system and advocating for the killing of Jews, should they be allowed to stay here at our leisure?
Senator, it is a matter of law, and it requires a legal interpretation, and I am not in a position to provide that legal interpretation. And let me add something.
Wait.
So
Not going to get a straight answer out of him. That's for sure.
I'd like the people advocating the extermination of Jews, I'd like them to stay.
Yeah, right.
Well, actually, it's not me who would like them to stay. It's my boss, Joe Biden, who would like them to stay.
And of course, it's a matter of law and so on. And we will decide that sometime in this century.
Maybe after the next election or two or three.
We'll see what happens then.
Yeah, I'll get back to you.
That's one thing. I think this thing has asked, this whole going back to that, what happened in Israel now. At one time they're all against the Jews doing. They want ceasefire. They shouldn't be doing this. Blah blah blah. And the next they turn around and now they're supporting the the Israelis. And by the way, I keep saying Israelis and Jews. There's Jews lived in Israel, obviously. 20% of the population of and they vote are Arab. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily Palestinians, but they are Arab. They have the right to vote. They don't have to serve in the military, but some of them do join the military. Every kid that graduates from high school in Israel, if you're Jewish, you have to serve at least 3 years for the reserves in the military before you go to college, I guess. And women have to do it too. They only have 2 years, but they're mandatory, have to do it. And in fact, the Arabs actually have seats in the Knesset. You think any Jews would ever have any kind of, if they even have any kind of representative government in any of these countries? Keep in mind too that Israel is the only democratic country in that whole area. They elect somebody. And Netanyahu can be thrown out of office anytime. If the Knesset thinks that he's his party does not have a complete majority, they are a coalition government. And in fact, he has coalition leaders, the other people that are not even there, and they're also in his war cabinet. Reminds me of Churchill and his war cabinet. All that stuff went by the boards when they got in the war with the Germans. Anyway, they have the Arabs have all the rights basically. They're looked down upon and that kind of thing and so on. But the bottom line is, they do have power within the Israeli political system. So that they're not. When you say the Israelis, you might mean a lot of people. You might mean a lot of the religious people and so on. But they're all Israelis.
Yeah, as you noted, there are Muslims who serve in the IDF, in the Israeli Defense Force.
Yeah.
And some of them appear to be quite patriotic. They've said, well, I was told how awful they are, and he says, and I kind of bought into it, but
yeah,
every time I turn around and see people trying to help somebody or do justice, and he says, it's them. So he says, I'm fighting for the country.
Yeah, right.
I haven't seen a ton of that, but I have seen it.
Yeah.
And I admire people who support being more humanitarian, more
and are willing to die for it
at any time.
Yeah, and are willing to die for it, and are dying. As the Israeli soldiers are dying tonight not the proportionate, as they say, but they're risking their lives. They go to it voluntarily. When all this started to happen, I think it was like 100,000. There's some ungodly number of people who were living in foreign countries who had born Israeli as citizens and had served in the Israeli army at that time. They got on a plane and they came back to Israel. That's saying something right there. You're talking about the diaspora of the Muslims and everything else. There's a lot of Jewish diaspora in every country in this world. You look it up. How many Jews are in Bolivia? How many Jews are in... Actually, the United States has the highest population of Jews
outside of Israel.
Outside of Israel.
Yeah.
They're like 5 million in this country. And all power, that's what our country really is. It's a amalgam of a lot of different things, a lot of different religions even.
I should mention something kind of intriguing, and this is a cultural note, that if you look internationally at who gets patents, and of course patents is sort of a reflection of how much invention and innovation you do. Muslim countries bring in very few. Worldwide, Jews get huge numbers of patents.
Yeah.
And that's an indication of work and intellectual activity,
right.
And which fields one goes into.
Yeah.
And I don't happen to think that I'm not picking people who are going to be inferior or superior, but something really intriguing that we know from the United States. We've been doing the IQ thing since, about 120 years.
Yeah.
And mostly that was the military wanted, when they had to induct a lot of people, they wanted to get people who would be skilled at or good at something as fast as they could, and that's what the testing was for.
Yeah.
Anyway, when people of Eastern European and Jewish origin around 1900 scored below the average.
Yeah.
These days they score above the average.
Yeah.
Now their genetics haven't changed, but something about the environment that they're in and what they encourage has changed. Even as blacks on net currently score lower, I think they would score very, very well in better circumstances. And in fact, all you have to do is look at some of the charter schools that have, that Washington, D.C. was one of the places that had several very good charter schools that were run by blacks and for blacks. And these were exactly the same people as the people next door who weren't going to the charter schools in genetic terms, in cultural terms.
Yeah.
But what was different was the school. And what do you know? They're scoring higher.
Yeah.
So I don't see chunks of people being inferior or superior. I see them as having better systems or worse systems that they're working in.
Yeah.
So when I say that, the Arabs are not doing well in patent terms. I can imagine them excelling, even as in the early Middle Ages, before they got intensely fundamental and more like what we have now. They were essentially they were what Paris was later. They attracted all the best thinkers from all over the world. They had the universities, they had the libraries, and it shows.
Mm-hmm.
They were preserving information and learning from all over the world that Europe was falling down on. So it was much later that the Europeans, as they start to explore again, they started like going to Spain and translating all this information that the Arabs had preserved and extended.
Yeah.
And all this astronomy that they had done. So what I'm saying is, I have problems with the way some people do some things now. I don't think anybody's inferior, and that if you're betting on
give them
that,
a chance, basically.
Exactly. If you're betting on some group being inferior and staying inferior, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's not how it's going to work.
Yeah, that's a good point, basically, because how to put it this way, but they're very hardworking people. I've known many Jewish people. In fact, didn't know they were Jewish basically until later. I figured it out that they were actually Jewish people. But they're very, and of course, in the process of disenfranchising, so to speak, the Jewish people. They couldn't have property rights. They weren't allowed to do certain things and so on, but they kept them in business. And what happened? Rothschilds and many other families who basically took over the financial workings of Britain, for example, and wouldn't have won the war on Napoleon without the Jewish people financing the British war effort in those days. It's amazing things that I have a great respect for Jewish people, and I didn't even know that I respect a lot of people, and then only found out later that I never really thought about it. I was brought up in Chicago. I'm sure there's a Jewish problem there too, but I now know that a couple of my friends, and I was a kid, 10 years old and so on, were Jewish kids, but I didn't even know that. There was no connection at all and so on. And that one of them went on to a huge career in physics. I remember that. I remember hearing about it many years later. So that's like I say, I don't know what people have. And look at Israel, a very successful country. It really is. They've won Nobel Prizes here over the last few years and so on. They're good. They're very high-tech driven. Their system is very high, very innovative in that, and I just think that's I just don't get it. I just don't understand why people have this anti-Semitism. I just don't get it. You want to show this one?
I do.
Okay.
This is
speaking of high tech and so on. Watch this. Watch this one.
This is humor. We're going to discuss it afterward, but I am not giving AOC a hard time on this. But you got to see this because it's sort of a joke at her expense. Oh.
My boyfriend has done for me. For example, the other day, I was at the grocery store, and I was trying to buy orange juice. The container said to concentrate. And so I did. Nothing happened. And I was really confused by this, but my boyfriend, worried about me, found me with my iPhone locator many hours later and was able to pull me away from the shelf. He's really something special.
So what's amusing about this is I'm not thrilled with how brilliant AOC is, but this isn't her. This can't be her.
All right.
This is a deep fake. And this is something to worry about because it looked good enough that a person could say, "Oh my God, is AOC that dumb?"
Yeah, exactly right. When I saw it, I thought it was real.
But in fact,
it ain't.
That's not it. Now, I originally saw the demonstrations where there was a video of Obama saying whatever somebody had decided to have him say, somebody having Trump say whatever they wanted him to say. But the artificial intelligence and analysis has been deep enough that you've got a lot of time to analyze somebody's appearance and the way they move and their mouth moves, everything changes.
Yeah.
And then you do the same thing with their speech. And apparently you can now make videos
Yeah.
where anybody you have enough information on will say
And you say
anything you
information,
want.
You mean video?
I mean video and audio
Yeah.
enough to generate a fake that will match.
Yeah.
So you could have her declaring war or teaching physics or whatever, because this is what the deep fakes are. And unfortunately, what this is, you got to think about this. This is the death of photographic evidence. This is the death of video evidence. You can say, well, I saw the video.
Death of actors, actually.
I saw the video. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah,
That
not
ain't
exactly. I mean, it's been bad enough that there are people who think that Trump was endorsing neo-Nazis, when if you actually just look at the video was cut some. If you actually just watch the video, you can see that he within literally the same sentence he says, and I don't mean those neo-Nazis and those KKK guys. He says they should be condemned utterly. So and yet people have come away saying, oh, I saw him endorsing the KKK. No, you didn't. Like, this is that Mandela effect.
I saw this, and I'm still not convinced that really isn't her. I don't know.
I'm convinced it's not her.
I know. I believe it. I just can't believe that she would say something like that in public, in front of a camera.
And she didn't.
Yeah, that's right.
But I'm watching the way the mouth moves, the way her face moves, and it's good. They've obviously used some real stuff.
Yeah.
Except those aren't her words, and they've been massaging the image. So that's not AOC, and those aren't her words.
Yeah.
But they managed to make you feel like it is.
We got a minute. We had a minute left, and I guess I'll give you the last word. But that's what Israel is all about: high-tech stuff. This is really high-tech stuff. Maybe get some of those Hamas people to say, "I'm really a Jew."
Yeah. Well.
So anyway, you only got a minute.
Well, in that case, I'm just going to make it a tribute to my friend, who was right there on the screen. That guy there in the middle, who is standing in front of Stonehenge, was my best friend for 32 years.
Yeah.
He's gone, but much missed.
Yeah. He had a good life, though.
He did.
He made good of the years. Traveled all over. Had friends in Sweden.
He literally learned Swedish just so that he could tour Sweden.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope we've been entertaining at least. We'll do it next time. It doesn't matter. We can't be canceled, so we'll be back. Thank you.
I can't be fired.
Can't be fired.